And we're live. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Blog Chat. It's Tuesday night. I'm Matt, and this is
Lance. Hey,
our names are at the bottom now, so it's pretty easy to figure out which one is which, right?
it works.
Yeah. So, welcome back. Hi, Sue. How you doing? Look at this. We have great technology now, where everybody's comments can pop up on screen. Good to see you, Sue. Thanks for tuning in. This week's topic is a hot one. It's a hot one. We know you've been asking for it for a while. Hello, Hal. How you doing?
Hey, Hal. All right.
How's it going? It's one of those things that's mystified many. Should you use a light pollution filter or not? And I couldn't have picked a better partner to have on tonight than Lance, who's been studying light pollution from a creative and a technical point of view for a long time.
Right. We're kind of coming at it from different angles, right?
Yeah, we certainly are. So we have Ed saying hello. How you doing?
Hey there.
We have Peoria and Jerry.
And Jerry.
How you doing, Jerry? How's
Good
it going,
evening,
man?
everybody. Cool.
Yeah. So it was a whopper of a blog post this week. Oh my gosh.
And something tells me it's just the beginning.
It's just the beginning. It's part one of
3.
Well, we'll see how many pieces.
Well, 3.5, right? Or 3 plus 1.
3.5. Yep. Hey, Vid. Hey, Paul. How you doing? Thanks for tuning in on Facebook. We are simulcasting to both YouTube and Facebook for the second week now. So thanks, everybody. If you see, now here's something I just want to say at the beginning, since this is new. If you guys see us reply to something, you didn't see that in the comments, it probably happened on the other platform. You're okay to be wherever you are. No big deal. We're going to try and repeat the questions when we see them so that nobody's confused. Or we'll show them on screen. So like this, Katrina on YouTube is saying hello. Hi, Katrina. And Shawnee. Hi, Shawnee. How you doing? So, yeah. And we're going to reply to comments too. So it comes back into the chat. So Lance and I will work on that together. But yeah, this was a big one. This was a really big one. The topic
coming too, right?
It was. I remember talking to Chris about wanting to do something with light pollution filters. I don't know, a year and a half ago, where they first started, when there was more than one company that had them. I was like, you know what? It's confusing. And I'd like to know more. And I thought about it. I thought about it for a long time. In fact, this is just the beginning of what I really want to do with the topic. And I'm not the only one participating. Other people are going to be publishing on this too in the second and third part of the series. But I hope that the emails that I sent out since this blog post went live turn into something big. We're hoping to do a big shootout of all the light pollution filters. And Lance and I were talking about collaborating on that. So it's going to be fun.
It's going to be really interesting to see how they perform differently, or if they perform differently. And, as we get into the post too, I'm sure we're going to see that, maybe this is something that we wish we'd had a while ago, right?
Yeah. I wish I had it for the film days, but
yeah, right. But they're here now.
We can use them. I'm sure we're going to learn more as we start adding our own light sources to it. Because I've been thinking about, well, if this blocks this wavelength or these wavelengths, as we're discovering, maybe we can do something with filtration on our lights to have some fun with it, to game it a little bit, so to speak. I just saw a funny comment here. Sue said, I figured out why my lightning photos were on the purple side. Had an astro-landscape filter on the lens. Yes. I wondered why everybody else was getting different exposure readings than I was for about 6 months. And that's because I had a circular polarizer on the front of my Zeiss.
For 6 months?
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. Wow. So we have Barry saying hello. Hey, Barry.
And hey, Suzanne.
Yep. And we're going to have fun with that. And then you're welcome, Suzanne. Went on your first socially distanced and mask knife photography. Yay! That's awesome. That's great, because we have a group in Yosemite right now doing the same thing. So
Yosemite?
I'm sorry.
Yellowstone.
It's the
thing.
Yosemite. Right. Oh, sorry. Okay, moving
Hey,
on.
just got to call out Suzanne's icon there, her little avatar. That's awesome.
Thank you for that, Suzanne. We're going to show. Oh, where'd it go? Oh, it's not showing it right now.
Yes,
It was
it
in
is.
our. Okay, good. Yeah. There it is. Yep. A moment for that. Thank
She's
you.
already missed, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Right.
here we have, jumping right in, how to deal with light pollution filters, part 1. How to deal with light pollution, part 1, filters. So I'm sure a lot of you read the blog post. As I was writing this, my metaphor that I thought of was, and I was called out on it because I didn't know about Turkish coffee, was you wouldn't make coffee without a filter, right? It does its job. It does a job. It does a specific job, which is to filter out something that's unwanted. And that's the same reason that these light pollution filters exist, is to take away, to stop something from happening that you find undesirable, like mud in your mouth. You don't want light pollution sometimes, right? So that's what that is. And I think that neutral density filters and polarizers are also good examples of filters that do their job well. So I also noted, and I've seen this before and I've studied them a little bit. There's a lot of other quote unquote light pollution filters that are for deep sky astrophotography, like telescope photography, star tracker photography. Right. Those I'm not talking about. I'm talking about what we do best, which is astro-landscape night photography and suburban and urban night photography. So maybe someday we'll get into those. But for now, I'm just talking about those slightly purple ones, that take away yellows and reds. So, Lance,
hey, let's talk before we talk about the filters. Let's talk about light pollution, what it is or what the problems are, and how it affects photography. There's basically two main problems of light pollution, as I see it. Right?
Hit me.
Well, you got color cast, and you've got the loss of stars from scattered light in the atmosphere. You can't see all the dimmer stars. If you're in a bright environment in the city, you can maybe see a handful of stars, right?
Right.
So they're kind of two different problems to address.
Is the latter a contrast issue or color contrast?
Well, is it because I think it's light reflecting off particles in our near atmosphere,
right?
That obscure dimmer stars out in deep space.
Yeah, I think we're talking about the same thing. And my take on it, not being a scientist, an optical scientist, is that it's reducing contrast in just one area of color. And then when you filter it out, the contrast goes back to what's more desirable. I'm not going to say right. I'm just going to say that pollution is a loss of contrast. And that's funny. I'm thinking about the days when I worked for Mamiya. Mamiya and Hasselblad were a classic rivalry. And Hasselblad lenses were perceived to be sharper because they had higher contrast. But when you looked at the MTF curves for the lenses compared, sometimes the Mamiya lenses would be sharper, but they had less contrast. So there was a little bit of gamification there going on there. So I'm gonna put my bet on it's like a color contrast issue. When you subtract that color, the contrast goes up, and the difference between the stars and the field behind it becomes more apparent.
Right. Yeah, I agree, and I think it's. I just wanted to point out the two different issues with both color and loss of contrast. And are these filters addressing both of those problems? And also on top of that, we've got our urban and industrial environments have a lot of different light sources, a lot of different colors.
Yeah.
So do these filters address light pollution in general, or more specifically, certain types of light?
Right. And that's what I set out to discover. And also the things that I don't know. I thought I knew stuff at the beginning of this, and now I know a little bit more stuff, and I have more questions too. But I feel pretty confident I know I can observe it does. So one of the things that I found as a problem as I was going into this, and I felt this way about filter manufacturers on on the whole, not that some brands are pretty good at this, but most of them aren't. They're not clearly describing what the filter does. They're sort of giving you marketing jargon. And in this case, it removes a yellow glow. Well, what does that mean? Right? I'm not going to beat a dead horse here, but it's really nice that I'll scroll down a little bit here. IRIX has this illustration on their website that shows you exactly a transmittance curve here, that the peak is at 589.3 nanometers, but there's a little bit on either side where it ramps back up. So it's catching a little bit of the hue to the left and the hue to the right. And this is going all the way down to 15%. So it doesn't block 100% of the 589.3, which is kind of orange. So it blocks 85%.
Yeah. So for those looking at this chart and wondering what the hell it is, it's the range, it's the visible light spectrum between 400 and 800 nanometers. That's the length of the wavelength of different colors of light. And that blue line there is the transmittance. When you have this filter in front of the lens, what percentage of the different wavelengths of light pass through the filter? So you can see most of it, it's up around 90% or so. Mm-hmm. But at 580 or so, it dips down to about 15%. And then up there around 740 or so, it dips down to 30-some% as well. So I'm not quite sure what color that is at
blue
740, but we know at the 580, 590, that is that orange, right? The yellow-orange.
Yellow-orange, yeah.
And that's what these filters are, or this particular filter anyway, is removing mostly.
That's a great explanation. Thanks, Lance. I should have started with that. You're absolutely right. I've worked with studying a bunch of filters too, and I know, having studied some of the facts that are available, that you can never get 100% transmittance because glass plus the coatings that they put on it always take some of the light. So if you get up to 99%, that's like the best UV filter you can get. Right. They don't transmit 100%. So it's not a bad thing that none of this hits 100%. It's just a fact of refraction and the substrate eating some of the light as it refracts through it. So
right. And that's what creates the filter factor, right? The need for additional exposure because some of the light isn't getting through.
Yep. So now that we've looked at that, this is something I grabbed from Wikipedia. This is sodium vapor lamps peaking at, you see that number right there, 589 nanometers. So this is the spectrum. And if you look, I'm just going to make it as big as possible. It's not just that orange color. There's a little bit of the yellow green to the left, and there's a little bit of the orange and the red, and a little bit of the blues to the right. It's minimal. It's mostly only that orange, right? But it still includes a little bit of the other spectrum. So, Lance, since I often get confused about this, low pressure sodium vapor lamps.
Okay.
You want to walk me through that?
So, sure, yeah. So this spike right here, or this graph, is showing the spectral spread of a low pressure sodium vapor light. They emit almost exclusively, and you can see by this spike, that narrow little band of light. Now, low pressure sodium vapor lights you will recognize immediately because they are intensely orange, and you can't see any other color when you're standing underneath of one of these lights. This is basically all you see is anything that's golden orange. Now, far more common are high pressure sodium vapor lights. That's the street lights that were predominant in all around the world until LEDs started taking over, and about 10 years ago. And high pressure sodium vapor lights, they peak at that same spot, that 589 nanometers, but they have a wider spread, and they transmit or they emit more of the color spectrum, a little bit more of the yellow, a little bit more of the red, but still not much in the blues and the purples. So that's why those lights, the high pressure sodium vapor, were used primarily as street lights, and the low pressure sodium vapor lights are used mostly for very specific purposes. You'll often see them if you are entering a tunnel. Sometimes you notice the color of the lights change, or you're in a tunnel.
Yeah.
Like they become this real intense orange, like, hey, something's happening here, wake up. In Europe, and they use these when you're out in the country and you're driving into a small town or a village. They'll have these orange low pressure lights on the outside of the village to alert you that you are coming into a built up area. And interestingly, for our purposes, low pressure sodium vapor lights are used around observatories, astronomical observatories, because it's very easy to filter out that spectrum, that narrow band of spectrum of light. So they do use these similar filters in and around the lighting in, say, the parking lot of an observatory.
Right.
So
that makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
But again, it's the high pressure sodium vapor lights have a fairly intensely orange glow, but it's a wider color spectrum than the very narrow band from low pressure sodium, which is, much less common there.
But they're both a pain in the ass.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. They're in today's lingo, we would say they both have a very low CRI, right?
Yes.
Color rendering index.
Yes. Awful.
Yeah.
Awful. Like -3.
Low.
Mercury vapor lamps, come in lots of different flavors too, and we could really get in the weeds here about it. But I think that the most common ones are the ones that are around the blue, green, and yellow, orange that I've seen or experienced. So that's just nice to know that they're out there, and it's also probably why IRIX has another dip in the blue here around 740. So that's probably to take care of, some of that blue.
Right.
Oh, the 430. I was wrong end there. That's red. Wow. Okay. LEDs, right? So now we have the big problem with LEDs, right? LEDs are beautiful. They're energy efficient. They last a really long time. They don't require a lot of maintenance. Therefore, municipalities are attracted to them because of a lot of those things. And that, once they put them in, they're going to have to reinvest for a long time. Also, they're very directional. So they can make some areas brighter with less energy. So they do diffuse them to scatter the light a little bit more, so they're not so spotlighty. However, I see most towns are using them now. Not Catskill, that's where I took some of the pictures that you guys saw. But there's a ton of LEDs where I live too, and everything's getting kind of neutral. I mean, how do you feel about that, Lance?
Well, it's making urban night photography probably a lot less interesting color-wise, for sure. I've always thought, I started out doing mostly urban and industrial night photography, and always thought that the most interesting thing were all of the mixed light sources that we had to play with. I would look for scenes that had, different colored lighting in different parts of the scene. LED lighting is making, as you said, everything much more neutral and more even and natural, realistic looking. But from a night photographer's perspective, it's kind of boring. But, also, of course, how they're implemented by the municipalities makes all the difference, too. If you look at LEDs in a gas station, for example, oh, they're efficient. Let's use like 80 million gazillion megawatts and blast, make it as bright as Times Square.
Or a deli.
Right. So,
yeah.
But, the next thing coming around the corner with this are, how well do these light pollution filters work with LED lights?
Not at all. Not at all. So not at all. But they're here.
And that's because they emit a much wider spectrum of the visible light.
Right.
Wider portion of the visible light spectrum.
Right. You guys might have heard of what Lance mentioned before, CRT, which is a way, kind of an older way now, of measuring the the relative efficacy of a light of rendering a certain number of color patches, right? Then they came out with this thing called TLCI, which is double the number of color patches. It's supposed to be more accurate, but this is a very basic explanation of a very complicated topic. Now there's 2 or 3 other ways to measure color rendition, and it gets really hairy to understand it. But the bottom line is this: the closer you are to something that it's actually burning, like a tungsten light source, like the sun, the more you're going to get full color spectrum. And they're trying to emulate that with these LEDs, but they still manufacturer to manufacturer. And I'm talking about the LEDs itself, and then they put things in front of it, may or may not subtract parts of the spectrum from it. But it's much better than the kinds of lights we discussed just prior to this. So they're almost like daylight. They're almost like the tungsten lamps that you used to use in your house. They're better than CFLs, compact fluorescence. They have, they're way better. They will render skin tones better, which may or may not concern you. But it's more like shooting daylight at night, which, like Lance was mentioning, takes some of the enchantment out of it. Because you had those mixed color situations that obviously made it look different than daylight. And I think that's part of the problem. But there's RGB lights now, so we can do whatever the heck we want, right? But that's hue. That's a different topic altogether. Let me get back to the blog post.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so how to use these light pollution filters is not clearly described was another thing that I identified. I didn't see a lot of instruction out there. Here and there was a manufacturer who took some steps to tell you maybe the filter factor out there, but none of them suggested what white balance you should use. And I looked at a bunch of them, and I was really kind of shocked by that. So it seems like they're making things, but they might not be users of the product. And I'm just calling it like I see it. I'm not, firing shots here, but I wish there was a little bit more helpful information out there. Yeah. The third thing I saw, and I think we all know this, using filters is inconvenient. It really is. It really is. I mean,
they get stuck.
Leave a comment right now if you love using filters and you find it really convenient. I dare you. I'm waiting.
Hey, speaking of that, Jerry's got a question about a rear filter for the IRIX lens. If anybody makes a night sky filter, one of those little resin or gel filters for the back slot. Haven't seen them.
I have a dim memory of that maybe being available. But Jerry, I'm not sure. I will find out. I know how to find you. I'll get back to you. Or reply in the comments too. That's interesting. Of
course, IRIX does make a range of filters for that rear slot so the 15 millimeter lens has a little tiny filter holder on the inside of the lens mount where you can drop in a resin filter, and IRIX makes a bunch, mostly neutral density filters. I think that might be the only thing they make to put in there.
It wouldn't be shocking if they decided to do one for this. That'd be great. I see some other questions. I'm going to answer those in a second after we get through the bread part of this topic. I find filters to be inconvenient, mainly because I'm afraid. It's fear. It's like we're doing this in the dark, and holding this thing like out over. And I'm Lance. You were there when my camera fell. The Smokies, and screwing on a filter while it's hanging over a railing that's over a gorge or something really kind of makes me anxious. Yeah. And then the glass filters.
And it's one thing when it's a $20 or $30 UV filter. It's another thing when it's a $200 or $300 light pollution filter, right?
Right.
These things that's another point. These things are not inexpensive.
Right. I didn't get into that in the post. I let people discover it for themselves. Like, does it work or not? That's all I was trying to talk about.
Right.
And then the drop-in filters, they're great, but they generally, you don't want to use the ones that are made of resin, because that's like, why would you put garbage in front of your lens and ruin all of the quality of the glass that you bought? So you should get the ones that are glass, and you should get good quality ones that are glass. But they're glass, and like You just worry about dropping these. I had a great comment on the blog post that Benro, the company that makes this filter, makes metal frames for these too. That makes it easier to handle them. And it also, like, they're geared on the sides so that when you have graduated filters, you can move them up and down.
Oh,
But it makes, so if you dropped it, there's a chance that it wouldn't shatter because it's in an aluminum frame. So interesting. And then there's the really smart manufacturers for the screw-in filters that have made magnetic mounts for those. And I find that really fascinating.
yeah, that was news to me. I have not seen those. That sounds pretty cool if they're really strong little magnets.
I have these tiny little magnets that are like smaller than a pencil eraser on my fridge, and I could barely get them off. I have to almost break my fingernail. So there's really high Gauss magnets out there. I trust they exist. So Suzanne asked this, any hints on how to get them unstuck? Yes, there's a thing called a filter wrench, and I could probably go find one, but it's basically a plastic thing, like a jar opener that you grab, and it holds onto it, and it has like teeth on the inside, and you use that to get it off. If you get one of those, they're like, I don't know, $10. Leave them in your bag. If you have filters, you'll always be able to get your filters off.
Yeah. And in the meantime, if you don't have one of those things, grab the filter from as many points as you can. Like, use your whole hand, spread around, and don't, you don't want to like squeeze it really tightly. It actually takes a light touch to release it, rather than, grabbing the thing and putting pressure on the ring. You don't want to put pressure on the ring. You want it to just very gently release.
And Paul was saying what I was going to say, which is you could wrap a whole bunch of rubber bands around it, and that one will give you purchase. But if you wrap a bunch around it, it makes it bigger and easier to grab. So, yeah. Woo. So yeah. So now we've talked about the inconvenience of filters, but guess what? Like we figured out that they kind of work. So
tripods are inconvenient too, but we still use them, right?
Yeah. They have a specific purpose. It's true.
They do.
So setting up for this, I could show you guys what I have. Like this was my setup, just so you know what I did my testing with. It was the Z6, the FTZ adapter, the IRIX 15mm 2.4 Firefly, and I have their filter adapter, and I'm just going to make on my screen big so you guys can see it. Okay, so yeah, this is their filter adapter, and it has this quick release on it. It's much easier when it's on the camera. There we go. So this is made specifically for an IRIX lens. It fits where the lens hood would on the edge. So you turn this and around the outside of it, and it locks into the bayonet there. And then you just leave that on the lens, and then you would hook this into the bottom, and then it just quick drops onto this, and you pull that to get it off. So what I was doing during my test was I was just screwing the IRIX one directly onto the end of this, and I had the Benro one in the filter, and I left that ring on. So I'd screw and unscrew that IRIX one, and then pop the Benro one on, so I wouldn't have to move the camera around that much. So it worked out pretty good for testing and trying to get things to not juggle around too much. Other things that you saw, or you may see during this, was I used a color checker passport too. And we're going to talk a little bit about the color science, but jumping back to me again real quick. This is the IRIX. It's wonderful because their packaging ends up being the way you carry it. You just take off the paper sleeve, and then you keep this in your bag. And I found this to be very easy to clamshell open in the dark, and very easy to grab in the dark. So if you're thinking about something that's easy to think about in the dark, I found that this filter holder case was very well done. And I didn't feel like this caused me anxiety. It was just the threading part. The Benro has this wonderful plastic case, and inside it has this high density foam, has two pieces actually, and a nice soft case for it. And if you take one of those pieces of foam out, if you get another one, you could store two filters in this and still have some protection. So that did give me some confidence too, except I had to take it out of all of this stuff and put it into the holder while I was using it. What else did I use? I used some other stuff. So, but we'll get into that. So when I tested, just to be absolutely clear, I shot all of these photographs in RAW, and I shot everything at tungsten white balance. Because number one, when I did my testing, that just happened to be the one that looked the best. And I thought, okay, well, if I keep it constant at camera's tungsten setting, everything's going to be pretty much the same the whole time. And I can cook to taste later on if I want to. So that's what I did. All right. So not to belabor the point, but I did my testing near where I live because we needed light pollution. I tested in Athens, New York, which is Portal 4. And I was facing towards north, towards Albany, which is, gosh, I forgot to check it. But look, Albany looks kind of like New York City. So Athens is that red pin at the bottom there. And then Albany is a lot of light up there. So, and then Catskill looking south, which is, pretty tame, and that would be a Portal 5. And then I went down to Astoria, which of course is crazy amount of light pollution in every direction that you look.
All right.
So that was Mecca, right?
Mecca for light pollution.
Yeah, Mecca for light pollution. I was like, where can I get the most number of light sources in one frame? That was pretty much it. So we talked about, how visible light occurs between 400 and 750 nanometers, which we saw above. And then I pulled out the color checker passport photo too. And I didn't include this in the blog post, but this is when the cop showed up. Nice gentleman walked up to me. I was wearing my headphones. I didn't notice him until he's like 10 feet away and going, hello. And he's like, hey, this was also 9/11 when I was shooting. And this is a war memorial. And he was just wondering what I was doing. And he said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm testing light pollution filters. And he looked at my gear, he looked at my face, decided I was being honest, and said, you have a good night, sir. I was like, you sure? He's like, well, technically the park's closed. He's like, no. I'm like, I can leave. He's like, no, you're good. You're good. I'm like, you sure? I can leave. He's like, no, you stay. So I stayed and I got to shoot these pictures. So all of these lights around me are sodium vapor, nasty orange. This is just a straight shot, right? With no filter whatsoever. So you might have seen what a color checker is supposed to look like. These colors are wrong. And this just shows you how terrible the color rendering is. So I built, and there's a lot of YouTube videos on this. After I shot the picture, I just exported it and created a profile for this. And I created a profile for the other two pictures I shot with the filter on and with the other filter on. And then they become available under your browse menu under the profiles. And I have IRIX light pollution filter sodium vapor and Benro light pollution filter sodium vapor. And you just add those as a camera profile, and then stuff like this happens. So I just wanted to introduce the color science here for a second to show you that you can take a terrible light source like that, and science can kind of make the colors pop back to where they should, right? This is just white balancing on the left, and this is on the right. It is adding the camera profile plus white balance. And if you look at the subtle hues, like this peach color and the brown color, and look between the two, there is a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure.
Huge.
In the background, you can see the difference in the green too.
Yeah.
In the grass.
And I noticed, like, look where the words are on the bottom. If you just look at the concrete that I'm resting the color checker on, it neutralized there. And it actually sort of subtracted one angle of the light. It reduced that light by 85%. So it's less bright too. That was interesting. So this part I did, and I just wanted to stress, like, what I'm doing here was only so you can understand how much less of the color spectrum was available, but also that should you absolutely need to make something look like daylight, you can make it look kind of like daylight by using something like this. And this was the best one that I could show you. This is no profile, no color correction whatsoever, just on the left, straight out of the camera. In the middle, only putting the IRIX filter on, and the right, only putting the Benro filter on. So you could see what happens. It looks a little bit more neutral in the center picture, and it looks a little bit redder on the right when you're looking at those sodium vapor lights. And it's fascinating. It's really fascinating to see that, but it definitely doesn't make all of the colors look right.
That's right, for sure.
So you're still going to need, the point of this is you're still going to need to do color correction even when you're using a light pollution filter. Woo! All right.
And, you know, how much of that color correction can be done with adjusting your white balance?
Correct. Yeah. If you bring something neutral, you know, like a white card, a gray card, or, you know, a color checker like this into your scene and just shoot it, you can try and do that. Oh, I did address that question up here, right? If you look at the one on the left, that's just white balancing. You look at the one on the right, that's with a color profile. So your colors are definitely not as vibrant as they could be, or as correct. They're not mapped correctly. So white balancing alone is not enough if you want to have really rich colors. But it's crazy. It's crazy to expect to get rich colors that look like daylight at night under a light source like that. It's kind of unreasonable, right?
Well, you did a pretty good job of you brought it a whole lot closer than we could have otherwise.
Yeah. It's just science, man.
So, you know, but, you know, again, the thing is that we're not in an urban environment. We're not necessarily trying to get everything to look just like daylight or completely normal.
No.
But I think also we're talking about you're photographing under nothing but sodium vapor light, as opposed to a scene with mixed lighting that we're seeking and looking out for different colored light sources in the same frame, intentionally looking for
truth.
Different colors.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that I went through this exercise just so you guys could understand what you're correcting and what you're not correcting, and just to be aware of what's going on here. So, yeah. So this is what I understood. Yeah, not only do they work, but I believe they're necessary, and all of these other selections here that I had, I believe are good proof of that. So, I could show you the blog post, and I probably will, but it's even easier. I think we can do some things that we couldn't do in the blog post. Like we can actually, you know, neutralize some things should we want to. So, yeah, wow. Getting into it, we'll start with the blog post here. This was facing towards Albany, and we're facing almost due north here. There's Polaris. And this is no light pollution filter, and it is a lovely photograph. You know, it works. It's calm, it's beautiful, it's glassy water, but the sky is blue and the clouds are yellow. And when I put on the Irix filter, I saw that the sky was bluer, but the clouds seemed to get kind of neutral where those light sources were hitting it, right? Over here, there's a different color of light source on the right-hand side. But over here, to me, it appears to be neutralish. So, yeah, that made me happy to see that.
How about the next one there?
And this one, it went even further. And this one was with the Benro, and it seemed to be, to my eye, even more neutral. And I can show them side by side through the magic of Lightroom. So let's see. Let's do a little comparage here. Tab. There we go.
So that's the two different filters.
Yeah. So the one on the left is the Irix, and the one on the right is the Benro. Right about that? No. I think I went reverse on this one. Yeah. And it's interesting that the two filters block slightly different parts of the spectrum to my eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one on the right, you can see there's a little bit more green.
Yeah. So this is further fueling my desire to get all of the filters in my hands at one time and shoot the same thing at the same time with all of them, to find out, you know, as much as we can, what are the differences between them that we can observe. You know, we're not a scientific testing facility, but we have a lot of experience. So why not take a look into it? So I noticed also that it was about a half to 2/3 of a stop that I had to add back in what I was shooting this. So it was 260. Yeah, actually, I just raised the exposure on these. After I shot these, I knew it. I knew that I had to do it, but I raised these in post.
To
So
match the brightness all across. Yeah.
yeah, because I was like, I could see it in the histogram when I was shooting it, but I wanted. So it's 0.85 on that one and 1.15 on that one. So
Yeah,
I got a little aggressive on those.
considerable boost in the exposure there. And then, it's not to be, it's not surprising really, because you're preventing a portion of the light from reaching the sensor.
Truth. These are backwards. That's why. Okay. Wow. So then I went even longer. 1,000 seconds. Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, that's something that I've noticed shooting under sodium vapor lights, or in particular, but just artificial lights in general. The longer you expose, the more the colors seem to shift.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure if that is a factor of atmosphere or accumulated light, but longer exposures under the same lighting conditions will give you more of a color shift than shorter ones, oftentimes.
I think I've observed that too. Wow. So these are these were the end of the night, and I had just that amount of time left to do this. I guess that's Mars rising there. And same exposure on these. So the second one obviously has the filter on it. And it's like the clouds kind of disappear. That was my observation in this one. And I'm sure if I ramp up, this one's already 1.85 up. Okay. That's 1.85 up. It seemed to me that you see how the clouds here are nice and smooth. And of course it's at a different time, but you could see through these clouds a lot more. In a lot of my exposure sequences, it seemed to take that light reflecting off of the clouds and eliminate 85% of it, which would make the clouds less visible because they're reflecting less light.
Yeah. Aren't the variables in testing one of the most frustrating things? Like, you cloud, you stay right there. Don't move.
Without a doubt, man. Without a doubt. Well, that's why I headed into town. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna work on things that, like don't move that much. And it was a clear night, less clouds. And this next one kind of blew my mind.
Yeah. That got really interesting for me too, right there.
I think I was having a sleepless night, and I think I was out at like 3 a.m. Oh my gosh, is that what happened? Yeah, I was out at like 3 a.m. because I was like not sleepy. And the one on the right I shot first, and the one on the left I put the filter on. That's it. It's the only change. And what happened? Just this light source over here just sort of went whoop, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Blows
So
my mind.
there's that 589 nanometer yellow orange spike. And look at that, the flare at the peak of the roof also disappeared as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, right there.
Crazy.
And I'm sure we'll get to it in a little bit. The reflections in the water are disappearing as well.
That blew my mind too. That one was fun. I walked around the corner after shooting this one, and I wanted to show you guys what it looks like. So this is the light that was hitting the side of that house over there, and this is with and without the filter. It's just remarkable because if you look in the background here, like it's pretty much the same, but then wherever this color was, it just the contrast increases because that color disappears. So in that wavelength, it just seems to clean up a lot. And that I think that's really significant for locations that have this lighting source. Oh yeah, and we saw that one already. So what are some pictures that I didn't show? Well, it is good to dive into this one a little bit more. But yeah, this one blew my mind when I saw it in camera. I said, that can't be right. Did something change? But it's almost like I put a circular polarizer on. I couldn't believe it. Like, why, how?
And
So
what really I find really interesting is not just the orange sodium vapor light, but the those reflections there.
why?
That's a metal halide or an LED light, probably a metal halide light. But why are they being filtered out? What else is happening in that filter?
Right. This is like a sodium vapor and a mercury next to each other, right?
Yeah, and it's affecting both of them.
What, why? Same amount of time? It blows my mind. This one I can explain in the middle. The lights on top of this turn on when somebody walks across. So they're dim when nobody's there and they're brighter when they're not. So this section right here was turned off because nobody was there. That I know about. But the rest of this, I don't know, man. I don't know. I didn't show this one. Might as well. The sun was coming up. I was shooting that long.
Oh man, good Lord.
Yeah.
412.
Yeah. It was starting to become the twilight that I normally don't see, But it was really interesting that the sky did get clearer when I put on the light pollution filter.
So which one is the filter there? It's the
You
one
tell
on
me.
the left, right? I hope it's the one on the left.
What do you think?
It's the color on the stone is certainly more neutral on the left.
You got it.
It's greener on the right.
Yep. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. It's the one on the left. Ta-da! You pass. Then we have these guys. Oh boy. And then I knew that a couple of days later I could do this. Well, this was not 11. So those other test shots that I shot were behind me by a couple of feet, and then I faced downstream towards New York City. And I didn't point this out in the blog post, but I'll show you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Did anybody notice that there was hey, you're supposed to zoom in when I click, that there's a nice straight light here going here? That's the Tribune lights from New York City. About 100 miles to the south.
And you're shooting in Catskill here?
I'm shooting in Catskill.
Wow.
That's the Tribune lights. I blew my mind. It blew my mind. So through the light pollution, and without a light pollution filter, I could still see that. But so yeah, we have a lot of those lights are hitting over here on the preserve that's across the creek. And this is the Hudson on the left and Catskill Creek on the right. And we got the Milky Way, it's nice and soft. You get it, right? And then you throw on the light pollution filter and then everything just sort of cleans up. And you can see this a little bit better.
Yeah.
Right. And then we go to the next one. And it seemed and these were cooked to taste. So.
But the white balance is cooked to taste, but you've changed the white balance or no?
Let's find out. I believe I did a little bit. So 3650, 2950, 3360, 3262. Yeah. So I was paying attention to the core of the Milky Way here, because that is the core there. I was trying to make the core of the Milky Way look pleasing. And this must be different than the way I did it. Oh, that's as shot. So yeah.
So this is addressing that other part of light pollution, that the blocking or the dimming of the dimmer stars in the sky, increasing that contrast. It's kind of like an in-camera dehaze slider, right?
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this one's a little bit cooked. I could reset both of these and we could see. In fact, I think that's an interesting exercise. So let's do that. Reset. And I'll reset all three of them. So now we can just take all of these guys and zoomify them. I wish you could do three up at the same time. Wouldn't that be nice?
Hit the N key. You do survey mode.
Hey, look at that. Woo. All right, so these are all as they came out of the camera. And we can even take a look at that. I can't zoom now. Oh,
No, you can only zoom in the compare mode.
yeah. Well, see, that's fun. Just right there, you can see how neutral the shrubberies across the way got, and of course the Milky Way seems to, like get a little bit fadier, but we know that we have to post process that. So we could take a step back to where we were, and go back to, oh, look at that. That one wasn't even touched that well. So, but on the next guy over, we had all this. So that one did clean up pretty good. And then you could see not bad for a Bortle 4, Bortle 5 suburb, right? To see that much of the Milky Way over New York City, 100 miles away.
Yeah, that's right. You're asking a lot there to see a screaming Milky Way as if you were out in Wyoming or something.
Oh, that'd be nice. I like Wyoming. Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's a big difference. And I didn't need to worry about this. Is definitely more pleasant to me looking at the horizon there. Like it just seems to be a more pleasant photograph. I could work on the yellows and the greens there, but it would be a lot more adjustments. And the contrast just seems to be much better. So that was fun.
Certainly cleaner.
Yeah. And then these are what'd you think about this, Lance?
Yeah. Pretty interesting because the sodium vapor is just about the only light in the scene. It's getting a lot darker, obviously. It's removing the yellow, but it's also, there isn't another light source there lighting up that side of the building. So it just goes deep into shadow.
Yep. I didn't show this in the blog post, but there's the behind the scenes. Whoa, hey, who's looking at the black and white? There we go. So there's all those other lights out there. And that's what it's filtering out. Get that beautiful shadow there. And I took a shot of it. Oh, look at that. I even did it with filtration. So there we go. Look at that. Did those shots with filters and without too. Crazy. Belaboring the point. All right. So then we had Astoria Park. Whew. Yeah. And this one, no filter. Irix, Benro.
Quite different.
Yeah. And I don't know what happened to this one. It seems to be gotten reset. Or is that not there we go. There's the Benro.
Yeah.
So yeah, they are quite different. Right. And this one, because there's such a cacophony of light sources, it's really hard to say what's going to work. And I think as an option, it's a good idea. But like, look at here at the bridge.
Yeah.
This is a crazy difference. But I did do some HSL adjustments.
Hey, look at that. The filter also takes out the airplane trails.
Oh, we could sell 1 million of those.
Yeah, that and our Aurora filter, right?
Yeah, we're gonna bundle that with the fireworks filter.
That's a filter out fireworks, right?
Exactly. So yeah, this one just blew my mind. I thought it was good, and as I said in the blog post, I kind of like the one with no filter better. It just, to me, it just seemed to be, having shot in the city for over a decade, it just seemed to be more like the city to me. But that could just be habitual, right? So yeah.
Well, one thing I took from your blog post is that just going out and buying one of these filters and slapping it on your lens isn't going to help you very much. You really have to do what you did and do some testing. Even if you're only using one filter, just comparing it, with and without, and looking at the images, studying them, on the computer.
No.
I think that really especially if you're going to spend that kind of money on a filter, it's important to do the testing as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And learn when it is appropriate, what it can do for you and what it can't do.
Yeah. Yeah. That was the rest of the learnings for me. It was, I was skeptical. I got to be honest. When I leaned into this, I said, I don't think this is going to be necessary. And, but I approached it with an open heart and an open mind. Like, let's use science to figure this out. And in the end, I ended up convincing myself I should keep one in my bag.
So when do you think you would use it? What conditions?
Portraiture. When there's a crazy light source nearby that I know will affect skin tones,
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably going to filter it out. And then I'm going to figure out how to counter filter on whatever light sources I'm using for the filter. And that's where I was thinking about the balancing act. And I'll probably consult the light meter, like Tim used the Sekonic C800 to figure out filtration for the coast. I think I'm going to try and do the same thing with whichever filter I end up choosing, because they were both pretty awesome. And yeah, I think that could have interesting effects, like having, a bluer sky out of camera, because I'm mixing so many light sources. To have them be a little bit more reliable could be an advantage to me.
Right. When you do the shootout, I hope you can get the specs on all the filters. It really would be, informative, not just to see the results, but to actually compare the results to the specs and what the manufacturers say they do. But it may also be like, secret recipe that they don't want to give away the trade secrets, right?
It's possible. It's possible. It's also possible that, they're working so hard to just get the products out and describe them to the best of their abilities that, and nobody's asked for it before, that it's just something that they didn't need to think about, being fair, so it's also possible. It's not like they're trying to hide anything from us. They're just, for the most part, they're just doing the best they can, so, but after this blog post, maybe I've convinced a few of them to say, all right, well, let's see if our data scientists have that, or can they do that at the factory? Because they have a lot of sophisticated equipment at the factory where they cut and grind and coat the filters, because they have to measure it for QA. So there's tests they could possibly do. Sure.
And they're also manufacturing these things for very specific, tolerances and
yep. Yep. So yeah, I would suggest, if anybody else were considering it, if you have those orange yellow lights near you and you don't like them, that's a win, right? That's a good opportunity. If you're traveling to a place, when you're doing your scouting, whether it be by Instagram or Google Photos or Flickr or whatever, if you see a prevalence of those things, you might want to have one with you. That would be good. Yeah, it was surprising. Otherwise, I think for the average person who shoots in the wilderness, like we wish we were doing all of the time, most of the time it really isn't going to matter.
Right. I was just thinking about shooting out in really dark parks or dark environments, where, a lot of times the light pollution ends up being just a little blip on the horizon, right?
Yeah.
Like Joshua Tree is one place in particular where you get a fair amount of light pollution that Joshua Tree is a dark sky community, but you've got the light from Palm Springs coming across
right. But, for sure. Where else? Gosh, I was thinking of Great Sand Dunes with the Alamosa to the south,
Yeah. Oh, and even Death Valley when you're at Badwater looking to the south, right?
Yeah. So I take it back. Even when you're in those places, humans are still nearby. Might as well have one with you.
Right. But, stay tuned for part 2 and part 3 of these blog posts, this series, because we can talk about other ways to deal with light pollution as well.
I wonder who's writing part 2. All right. Wow. We have gabbed for a long time. Perhaps we should take some questions.
Whew. Right. Okay.
So does anybody have any questions? Please let us know. For now, I'm just going to check in and say, hi, Ken. Good to see you. Thank you for tuning in. We always enjoy having you here.
Oh, hey, let me take a second and mention that Ken and I are going to be doing our Instagram Live tomorrow night. I'll be interviewing Ken about his book that came out earlier this year, or was it late last year?
That's fantastic. Oh, he's not saying this comment about that, Lance. I'm sorry. So join us on what day is that going to be, Lance?
That's tomorrow at 8 on Instagram Live.
Tomorrow at 8 p.m.
8 Eastern.
Right. Instagram Live. I'm typing it out now with Ken Lee and Lance. 8 p.m. Eastern.
And we're going to be pushing Ken to the limit because he's probably just getting off of work too. He's in California, so it'll be 5 o'clock for him.
Ooh, beer o'clock.
Yeah.
Ken says hello. And you guys can say hello to Ken tomorrow. All right. So we have a comment from Sue. Wow, there's definitely a difference in these two filters. Great to see the comparison between no filter and filters. Glad we could provide that. It was fun to, yeah, it was fun. I like this one too. It's always disheartening when you run out of night when you're on a roll. It's true. It's so rare that I see the sunrise from that side.
You know, it happened a lot more 10, 15 years ago than it does these days, doesn't it?
It's true. It's true. You can thank, this was sponsored by Insomnia. Oh, Katrina said she used a cheap jar opener to get filters off. That also works too. Like that. And I like this comment because I agree. Filters can do a couple of things that we don't like. One is if you get a cheap filter, it could degrade the quality of your image. So,
and hey, even if you've got a really good filter with fingerprints on it, it can degrade your image too, right?
Right. Or you can buy a really good filter and they lied about how good it is too. It happens. And also, the more surfaces you have, the more opportunity is for light to bounce around, and that can cause reflections on the backside of the filter. Light will come in, hit the front of your lens, hit the back of the filter, and cause flare. So you're going to see ghosting and flare because you put a filter on.
Yeah, that's the more surfaces you have to keep clean too.
Truth. Oh, and I love this. LEDs do ruin the mood. Nice.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny. Sometimes when I'm shooting in nothing but sodium vapor light, you know, if there's no other color around and it's just such ugly, miserable light, the default there is, hey, this looks like a black and white photograph to me. And I'm also thinking that sometimes with LED, nothing but LED too, because it's not that different from the daytime.
Right. We got a non-filter question from Jay.
Well, you're the Z-Man.
I am. So the new 14-24 2.8 looks extraordinary. I can't wait to try it. I expect just as much or more out of it than the classic 14-24 for the F mount. I would prefer the Z6, having used it. I have not tried the Z5, but isn't that the one that has less stuff?
Yeah, it's a step down, right?
Is it the same sensor size? I would have to go look that up. I'm just going to have to say right now, Jay, that I think that the Z6, just because I'm using it, is the right one. But that's the wrong thing to say. I'm kidding. The Z5 is 24 megapixels. Yes. I'm just checking to see what the big difference is. And if it weren't this late at night, I would already know. So I don't know if it's DX or FX. So
no, I think it's FX, and the 3 is the DX.
It's FX. Yeah. Okay. Yep. 24 megapixels, 4K. You know what? I don't have an answer to that. So how about we just let you know in the comments, or I think we know how to find you, Jay. We'll reply. Yeah. I'll probably call in Gabe on this one because he's had his hands on both. So
has he had his hands on that lens yet?
I don't think so, or else he would have bragged about it.
Right.
So Steve said he sometimes used I'm going to botch this, Didymium filter from Hoya for the Milky Way. It only blocks yellow. but also enhances red.
Right.
That's
And
cool.
there's a number of light pollution filters that are that didymium or didymium glass. And I think, what's his name? Ian Norman's, he came out with one of these. He was one of the first to come out with this, and he produced that filter. And it was a red enhancer, so you can use it for deep space astrophotography as well.
On 2 occasions, I've had students bring the red enhancer filter with them for Milky Way shots, and I did see a remarkable difference in that. It was a good call, especially with dark skies. Sue said she never thought about glass versus resin. Yes, it's a thing. Plastic versus glass. Plastic's great, but glass is better. All right, here's a color and white balance question. Ever have an image where the combo of light sources makes it pretty near impossible to adjust the white balance to something pleasing? Yes, that's what black and white is for.
Exactly. That's right.
Right.
So, hey, but that's a point. We were talking about using mixed light before.
Yeah.
And when those light sources overlap on top of each other, that can be pretty ugly. But when they fall on different surfaces in the same scene, that's where the real beauty happens. Or sometimes if they're overlapping and you've got shadows blocking one of the light sources, you can get some really cool effects too.
The color blend and the shadows. I love that. Yeah. So I tongue firmly planted in cheek when I say change it to black and white. There are beautiful instances of that. If you don't find it pleasing, then pick one place to neutralize and see what you can do to the part that you find not so good.
Right. And the post-processing tools have become so powerful now that, with local adjustments, you can really do a lot of color manipulation on a particular area of an image.
True.
So, but it can be a lot of work for sure.
Yep. Well, it looks like our questions have sort of slowed down a little bit.
$400 difference between the 5 and the Z6.
Yeah, I'm ashamed that I don't know what it is. I've had my head in the sand a little bit doing this blog thing. So
I think part of it are the video capabilities of the 6. But we'll have to do some little more research.
Which was important to me, So there's an interesting question. Does converting to black and white make the stars stand out more? I'd say that in some cases, it depends on the color's presence. A lot of it has to do with other adjustments that you would make to contrast.
Yeah, I think the presence tools are, of texture and clarity and dehaze are what's going to make the stars stand out more or less, and the careful application of those tools.
Right. We got Walter in the house.
In black and white, you can be a little bit more. You can be a little bit more aggressive with those presence tools.
Right, because nobody sees in black and white, so it's all fantasy.
And the artifacting that you get in your colors is obviously not going to show up in black and white as well.
Right, just as a value.
Yeah.
Unless it posterizes, who cares?
Yeah.
So we have this. Walter showed up. Hey, Walter, how you doing? Would you consider a composite with different filters for the best color results than blending them together? My crazy brain has gone there. I have thought about this, ever since the days of, remember the little Koken filter books where they showed how you could put one filter on your lens front and one filter on your flash and get crazy combinations. Yeah, I'm thinking about that. I think that would be a lot of fun. For static objects like astro-landscape, yeah, that could be really interesting to see, or even urban stuff. Again, I'd just be worried about registration.
Yeah, and I don't know. To me, that sounds like taking a lot of the fun out of, the night photography aspect of, why we're shooting at night anyway. I guess it depends in the situation that you're going to be applying that. If you're, out in a landscape or in an urban environment. If you're trying to, make everything completely neutral and color correct in an urban environment, well, shoot the daytime and you don't have to worry about it.
Right.
But on the other hand, if you've got like you're doing a portrait or something like that, well, I don't know. You don't have your model stand still for multiple filter switches there.
Right. It's an interesting question. I think it's a fantastic idea to try. Let us know how it works out, Walter. No, I mean, like, if you're doing, like, my mind goes to like making 3-color registrations and stuff like that, you know, from my printmaking days. Like that'd be fascinating, you know. But in practice, you know, it's like going back to a view camera. So
do you ever shoot with a Harris shutter?
No.
That was a 3-color filter that you pass in front of the lens during a long exposure.
It just blew my mind. Reminds me of when I worked for CNR and there was the DCB camera back, and it had that filter wheel on the front. It would take 3 pictures and combine them in the back. It was a 2 megapixel back that was $25,000. It would take a picture with red, picture with green, and combine them together. Anyway.
Oof. Martha got a question for us there.
Martha, if I'm shooting in black and white, does white balance matter? Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can adjust the white balance after you shoot it. I would try to shoot it as true to as what you would do for color photography. But where you place those colors affects what you can do with the black and white post-processing. And if certain colors are there or not there, it'll affect your flexibility during post-processing.
Right.
So what white balance you shoot at may or may not matter much, because your camera is basically, that's an interpretation of the raw data.
You know, I think a real easy way to demonstrate how that does affect your image is convert an image to black and white and then change the white balance in Lightroom.
Yeah.
And
good point.
You'll see the image change.
Yep. Or you can go into HSL.
Right.
Actually, at that point, it's just the black and white sliders, but you choose different color channels. Jerry pointed out that the Z5 has 2 card slots. Some people do care about that. Yep. I have one gigantic XQD card, which I use for video. So plus an external recorder, you know, so my Atomos. Yeah. Wow. We got a lot of people sticking in. So yeah, there we go. I got my 120 gigs there.
Ooh, geez.
Hey,
That's
video,
like
man.
a filter. You don't want to change that hanging over the bridge either.
No.
Or the
cliff. No. Excuse me. I talk so much. I talk myself dry. Wow. Martha just said she doesn't notice or pay attention while shooting monochrome. I think that is a great artifact of shooting monochrome. Shooting color is very deliberate, and you should be careful when you're using color. You should be conscious of color. When you're shooting black and white, it gives you the freedom to think in tones instead. So I think it's natural what you're saying you're doing.
Sure.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I think
it was a beast of a post, and it's turned out to be a beast of a blog chat.
It has. That was great. You guys are amazing. Thank you all. We had a great crowd this whole time. Very active with the questions and the listening. And thank you for your time. We appreciate you.
Thank you much.
Thank you, Lance, for coming on and helping me go through this. And gosh, I always appreciate your knowledge. Thanks for helping me in this.
Yeah, of course. And well, we'll see what happens next week, right?
Yeah. I'm excited.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
And again, tomorrow, if you can, tune in for Ken Lee on Instagram Live at 8 Eastern.
That's right.
So
that's right. In the meantime, seize the night. Have a great evening. And hey, there's still some nighttime out there. So why don't you go take some pictures?
Because it's getting cold, man. It's not cold anymore. We had frost 2 nights in a row.
We did too.
Did you?
We did too. It's too bad it's going to warm up again. But yeah, anyway, it's a good time to go shoot. We're not going to take any more of your time. You guys are the best.
Thanks, everybody.
See you tomorrow night. Good night.